I can remember we were horseplaying around. Then we heard the first scream.
For centuries, the legends have lingered. A giant in the trees, a shadow just beyond the firelight, a scream that echoes through the pines and leaves no tracks. We've laughed at it, we've dismissed it, but every so often, someone sees it. Not a blurry figure in the fog, but something undeniable, towering, breathing, watching. This film is not about fantasy, it's about patterns. People thousands of miles apart. Different towns, different lives, all describing the same impossible thing. Tonight we'll follow the stories they never meant to tell, the recordings they can't explain. This is more than a documentary. This is a map of the moments we weren't supposed to see. And when you trace those moments, you find one truth waiting in the shadows. It's not just real, it's here.
Came into view when it got in front of that picture window. And it was on 2 feet.
There are trips that become lifelong memories for the beauty, the laughter, the bonding. But sometimes, a trip turns into a story that no one talks about unless they have to. A story that gets told in quiet voices, in past tense, and always with a nervous glance toward the trees. This is one of those stories. Featured on the Travel Channel, this account comes from a group of now adult siblings and cousins who years ago experienced something they still struggle to explain. They were just kids then, out in the forest for a family weekend getaway. Their mother and aunt had rented a quiet cabin tucked deep in the woods. It was meant to be fun, relaxing, a break from the noise of city life. But what happened that night would follow them forever. The story begins like any other: laughter, games, the warmth of a fire, a bunch of kids tossing pillows at each other in the living room, music playing faintly in the background. The house was cozy, old but charming, surrounded on all sides by dense trees and a narrow gravel road. Far from neighbors, far from help. Then, it happened.
We were horseplaying around. Then we heard the first scream.
Mom!
The sound silenced the room. It wasn't an animal, at least not one they could name. It was high-pitched but heavy, filled with rage, almost like something was in pain or hunting. The kids ran to their mother in a panic. She was in the kitchen, confused, until she heard it too. Then came the second sound, a deep growl that vibrated through the walls. That's when their aunt sprang into action. Without a word, she left the room, walked straight to the back bedroom, and returned holding a double-barrel shotgun, loaded. And that's when the fear became real. Because when the adults are scared, you know it's not just imagination.
My aunt went from the living room into the bedroom and got a shotgun. When I saw my mom screaming, my aunt holding a gun, and then I knew, oh God, something's really bad.
They gathered near the living room. There was a large picture window covered by a thick curtain. The children peeked between the fabric. Outside, the darkness was thick. The porch light cast only a faint glow across the gravel. Bang! The front door shook violently, as if something had slammed into it full force. Then again, bang! Bang! The kids screamed. The aunt stood ready, aiming the shotgun at the door.
Bang hit.
When this creature started hitting the house, it felt like our hearts were going to explode because we were screaming just as loud as it was.
The mom huddled the kids behind her. And then, silence. But not for long. They heard it again. Footsteps, heavy, measured, walking around the porch, circling the house. One of the kids recalls, "It felt like it was looking for a way in, like it was testing us." Then came the tapping. Not banging this time, just tap, tap, tap on the living room window, like it knew they were watching. And then they saw it, just the silhouette, through the curtain. But it was enough. Tall, broad, bipedal, arms long enough to touch the ground. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a man. It was something else. The shadow moved again, stepping to the wall, and it started slamming, hard, over and over. The entire house seemed to shake.
And it didn't let up.
And this thing came into view when it got in front of that picture window. And it was on 2 feet.
And it was tall. It had a silhouette of a human. A very, very, very big.
That's when the aunt opened the door. Shotgun in hand, flashlight beam slicing through the dark, she stepped out onto the porch. Their mother followed, holding a torchlight. The air outside was freezing. Still, but the smell was instant. Rot, wet fur. Like something had been living in the mud and meat for weeks. The aunt cocked the shotgun. The creature yelled again as if it made it angry. It let out a guttural scream, the kind that echoes deep into your bones. But then, it turned and vanished, just like that. No sounds, no crashing through trees, just gone. Everyone stood frozen for what felt like forever.
I don't know what it is, but I've got to get it. No, don't. You can't go out there.
And my aunt at that point is like, that's it. My aunt went out the door, and I grabbed onto the back of my mom. Just reactionary, I was scared, and I was holding on to her. As we were coming out the door, this thing was hitting the wall as it was going down the side of the house. My aunt, she had a double-barrel shotgun in her hand, and she cocked it. And when she cocked it, this thing got angry and screamed. That guttural yell again. You could see its calf.
What is that? What was that?
It was like a man's leg, but it was covered in hair, fur. And then it was complete quiet.
It was silence.
One of them, now grown, recalls, "It left, but the smell stayed. I'll never forget that smell." They locked every door and window. No one slept. Morning couldn't come fast enough. When it finally did, they went outside to look. What they found chilled them all over again. Huge footprints, too wide and too deep for any man, leading from the shed to the porch, around the house, then vanishing into the trees. The siding on one side of the house was scratched, deep, jagged gouges, as if claws had tried to dig through the walls. And the window? Fogged from the outside, as if something had stood there, breathing. That was the last time they visited that cabin. They left that day, and the house was eventually sold. But no one from that trip, not the mother, the aunt, or any of the kids, ever forgot what happened.
What's that smell?
And the smell,
Oh, it smells like an animal.
you know, when you go to the zoo and you go to the ape house, that smell, a sweaty, sour, it almost gags you.
Let's go.
Some say it was a bear. Some say it was imagination. But ask anyone who was there, they'll say the same thing. It wasn't a bear, it wasn't human. And whatever it was, it wanted in. It was just another cold, silent morning in the remote wilderness of Alberta. Snow had been falling overnight, covering the trees, roads, and landscape under a thick white sheet. The air was still, almost unnaturally so. No animals, no birds. Even the wind had taken the day off, leaving behind a quiet that felt heavier than peace. It felt watchful. A local oilfield worker was making his regular rounds, driving a narrow back road about 30 miles east of Banff National Park, just outside the town of Nordegg. His dash cam was on, as always, recording everything from the cab of his truck. It was routine, just part of the job. Outside, the world looked beautiful. Frozen. Calm. He stopped briefly to check a pressure valve, brushed some snow off a gauge, then climbed back inside, cranked up the heat, and moved on. The day passed uneventfully. But that night, everything changed.
So we end up spending a lot of time looking at information that perhaps we wouldn't have been exposed to otherwise. I've read about something called the negativity bias. So how does that affect how we consume information in an online era?
Back at the camp, the workers sat down to review the dashcam footage, searching for a completely unrelated detail in the background of the site. What he found instead made his heart skip. There, just behind the tree line, standing motionless at the edge of the woods on the right side of the road, was a figure. He hadn't seen it in person, but the camera did. It was tall, massive actually, easily 8 feet high, towering above the underbrush. Dark fur, matted slightly with snow. Arms long, too long, hanging well past where a human's elbows would fall. But it wasn't just the size or shape that sent chills down his spine. It was what the figure was holding. Tucked into its chest, something smaller. A shape that resembled a child, or something it was protecting. The gesture was unmistakable, like a mother carrying her young. The man's mind reeled, and then he remembered. Just a few years prior, in December 2019, another man, David Beaver, had shared footage of a similarly massive creature in this same region. That one, too, appeared to be cradling something. It was less than 30 miles from this spot. Same posture, same eerie stillness. Could this be the same Bigfoot family, now migrating east, following food sources, or seeking shelter from the deepening snow? Was there a pattern to these sightings? And more unsettling, how many people had passed through this road, unaware that something was just feet away, standing perfectly still? The footage continues without sound, only the faint crunch of tires on packed snow and the whisper of falling flakes. The creature doesn't move, doesn't flinch, it just watches. Hidden in plain sight. It wasn't caught because it wanted to be. It was caught by accident. And that may be the most terrifying detail of all. We may think the wilderness is empty, but the truth, something might be watching. And if it's protecting its young, then it's not just a creature. It's a parent, with a reason to hide, and a reason to stay close. You ever get that feeling like you're being watched? Not in the city, not in a crowd, but somewhere quiet, isolated, where every sound echoes and the silence feels thick. That's what one man felt deep in the forests of North America. He wasn't out there for anything special, no research, no hunting, just a breath of fresh air, far away from the static of city life. The trees were tall, the forest floor soft with moss. Birds chirped, sunlight filtered gently through the pine branches. Everything felt normal, until it didn't. The man had stopped for a sip of water when something shifted at the edge of his vision. He turned slowly, and that's when he saw it. A figure, large, dark, upright.
trees.
It moved between the trees like it belonged there, not crawling, not hunched, but walking, with long, heavy steps. Its shoulders were massive, arms dangling unnaturally low, swaying slightly as it moved. It was tall, thick, covered head to toe in coarse black hair. But what struck him most wasn't the size. It was the way it moved. There was no panic, no fear. It walked calmly, confidently, like it knew this place, like it owned it, and maybe like it knew it was being watched. The hiker barely breathed. He raised his phone, hit record. You can see it in the clip. The creature doesn't turn, doesn't speed up. It just keeps walking, straight through dense underbrush, like none of it matters. Almost as if it's leading him or warning him. The man whispered to himself, "This isn't right. I'm not supposed to see this." And maybe he wasn't. For years, legends have whispered about creatures in these woods. Bigfoot, Sasquatch, forest giants. But they always vanish before we get proof. Every photo is blurry. Every video is shaky. Every witness is left with more questions than answers. But what if it's not just one? What if they're out there, many of them, watching us from the shadows, walking the same trails, hearing every twig we step on, smelling us long before we know they're there? Every year, hikers disappear. Campers vanish. Some are found. Most aren't. And the forest never says a word. So next time you're alone in the woods and the wind dies, the birds go quiet, and your gut tells you to turn back, maybe listen, because whatever's watching you might not be human. It was a quiet ride through the deep woods of Massachusetts. The kind of solo escape most mountain bikers dream about. No crowds, no traffic, just the sound of tires crunching over dirt and the wind moving through trees older than any town nearby. It was 2015, and this rider, armed with a GoPro, was ready to capture his day in the wild. The forest was thick, branches hung low. Sunlight barely pierced through the dense green above. It was peaceful, untouched, the kind of place that hides more than it reveals. Then, it happened. The rider slowed down. He'd seen something. Just off the trail, between the trees, movement, small, quick, but not in a way he could explain. It wasn't a deer, it wasn't a rabbit, it wasn't anything he'd seen on these trails before. It moved differently. He pulled over. The GoPro picked up the tension in his breath, the way the camera began to shake slightly in his hands. His voice dropped to a whisper, and then, a flash. A figure darted between the trunks, covered in hair, low to the ground, upright. It didn't crawl, it didn't hop. It ran, on two legs, like a child running through the woods, but wild. He panned the camera, tried to zoom in, but the thing had already vanished into the undergrowth, moving like it knew the land, knew how to hide, how to disappear before anyone got a clear look. Some might laugh and say it was a baby bear, but when you watch the clip, when you pause it, frame by frame, you see something else. The posture, the proportion, the strange grace in its movement, something that doesn't add up. And that's what unsettled him the most, because if it was a baby, where was the mother? For a moment he just stood there. The trail he'd loved for years now felt strange, unfamiliar, like the woods weren't just trees and moss anymore, but something alive, watching, deciding. Massachusetts has always carried its share of wilderness legends, but this was real, caught on camera, brief as it was. So the next time you're alone on a forest trail, breathing in the silence, surrounded by nothing but woods, keep your eyes open. Because if that was a young Sasquatch, then something much bigger is out there too. And it's probably not far behind. British Columbia, the Tantalus Range, remote, jagged, icy. It was July 2nd, 20th, a clear summer day in the high Alpine. Wildlife biologist Miles Lamont was hiking near Squamish, Canada, when he noticed something unusual.
We're on top of Tricuni Peak, and pretty sure there's just Sasquatch down there.
Oh my God.
I can't really see it very well. There's this little black dot walking in the middle of the snow, in the middle of nowhere.
High above the valley floor, near 7,000 feet elevation, a tiny black figure moved across a snowy ridge. From that distance, it looked like a speck. But it wasn't still. It was climbing. Fast, upright, deliberate. Lamont caught it on film, puzzled. "If that's a human," he said.
Why would he walk up that way? If that was a human, why would you walk up that ridge or that snow line? Why would you not just go straight down?
Why would they be walking up that ridge? No one hikes uphill into the cold unless they have a reason. And certainly not without gear. No backpacks, no snowshoes, no visible equipment. Just a lone, dark figure moving across deep snow as if the terrain didn't matter. Lamont, an experienced outdoorsman and wildlife biologist, had seen plenty of backcountry travelers.
Good thing we brought beers. We could lure him over here. Dude, that's bizarre.
This wasn't like any of them. His voice in the footage carries a strange mix of curiosity and tension. He even jokes, maybe if we had a few beers, we could lure him over. But he's unsettled. This was not quite like any of those, he later said. It was a bit different. The video stirred up waves online. Debates erupted. Was it a person? Or something else?
We're in the middle of nowhere right now. I don't know how high we are, but we're probably close to 7,000 feet. 6,500 maybe.
That's when a man named Peter Tennant, or Ridgewalker Pete, stepped forward. He claimed the figure was him. A solo hiker from White Rock, BC, Pete said he had been in the area that same summer. No pack, no snowshoes, just an emergency locator. He was exploring. Simple, harmless. But then, the timeline unraveled.
But I mean, he's hiking through snow like it's his job. And where the hell is he going? I mean, there's nowhere to go that way.
Pete claimed he was on Tricuni Mountain during the last week of July. Lamont's footage, dated July 2nd, 3 weeks apart, different locations, same range, but not the same day. So if it wasn't Pete, who or what was it? A figure, alone, high in the snow, without gear, moving quickly where few dare to tread. In the deep wilderness of British Columbia, far from roads and watchers, maybe legends walk the ridgelines after all. And sometimes, we catch them on camera.
I don't...
Deep in the heart of the Pacific Northwest, where the forest canopy blocks the sun and the silence hangs heavy in the air, Paul Freeman, a seasoned tracker, stumbled upon something that still defies explanation. It was 1994, and Freeman, no stranger to the woods, had ventured out into one of the region's most untouched and remote areas. He wasn't chasing headlines, he was following signs, tracks, broken branches. That subtle, almost invisible trail only trained eyes catch. Then, he saw it. A figure, massive and dark, moving among the trees. Without hesitation, Freeman raised his camcorder, an old VHS handheld, and hit record. What he captured that day would go on to become one of the most controversial and compelling Bigfoot videos ever recorded. The footage is grainy, rough, the kind you'd expect from a tape over 2 decades old. But frame by frame, it reveals something extraordinary. The creature, tall, broad-shouldered, covered in dark hair, moves with surprising grace. It brushes past a tree, then suddenly, it bends down. What happens next has fueled debate for years. It lifts something. In its left arm, the figure appears to cradle a smaller form. Something compact, motionless. A baby? A juvenile? The way it holds it, tight against its side, secure, deliberate. It doesn't feel accidental. It feels parental. Researchers who've stabilized and enhanced the footage point to that moment. That single movement, that subtle reach, the shift in weight, the care. Skeptics say it's nothing, just the angle, a trick of the light. But for those who've studied wildlife behavior, it looks all too real. Freeman never wavered. Until his death in 2003, he stood by what he saw, what he recorded. He wasn't out to fool anyone. He was a man of the woods, and he knew what he saw wasn't human. No CGI, no digital tricks, just a shaky VHS tape, and one chilling mystery. If that was a Bigfoot, and if it was carrying its young, then the truth is even more haunting. Bigfoot isn't just real. They're raising families in the woods, and we're just now starting to notice. It was October 8th, 2020, a night painted in silence and cold. The kind of night where even the trees seem to listen. Deep in the forest, far from city lights and cell towers, a lone explorer was doing what he loved, metal detecting. He wasn't looking for danger, just relics, forgotten things buried beneath layers of moss and time. For a while, everything was peaceful. His flashlight cut through the darkness. The detector chirped softly, and soon he pulled something from the ground, a rusted piece of old metal. He held it up to the camera, smiling. A good find, a quiet night.
Well, it's getting dark on me. Down to my last target. Looks like a little wooden or...
Then, the sound came. Low, long, drawn out. Not a howl, not a bird call, not human. Something else entirely. It stopped him in his tracks. He paused, listening. Tried to laugh it off, even mumbled something to the camera. But then, it came again.
What's that?
Louder this time. Closer. It didn't sound like anything he could name, and this time, it echoed. It bounced through the trees like whatever made it wasn't far. Like it was moving, circling, watching. The man whispered to himself, "What the hell was that?" His voice was tight now. The camera shook slightly. You could hear it. The shift. The instinct. He wasn't alone. He stopped filming.
Whoa, did you guys Did you guys hear that? It sounded like something howling.
The forest, once open and still, felt like it was breathing. Closing in, he started walking, not running but fast, steady, every step matched by the feeling that something else was walking too. He never saw it, but he felt it, a weight, a pressure, the kind of presence that makes your skin crawl even when there's no one in sight. Eventually, after what felt like forever, the trees broke. Highway lights appeared through the branches like salvation.
Oh, jeez.
He stepped out of the woods, safe but changed. He looked back, still nothing, but the scream, that stayed with him. And he swears, whatever made that noise wasn't from this world. Skinwalker, Wendigo, or something unnamed still waiting in the dark? All he knows is he never went back. And maybe you shouldn't either. It started like any other hike. Clear skies, birdsong, sunlight dripping through pine needles. Deep in the Colorado backcountry, far from campsites and tourist trails, a man walked alone. But this wasn't just any hiker. This was the man behind the Colorado Bigfoot YouTube channel, a tracker known for seeking what most people refuse to believe exists. He's done this before. He's seen strange things, but this day felt off. The deeper he went, the quieter it got.
If I didn't, it sure looks like it. Remember, pareidolia is trees and leaves coming together. It's not.
Birds stopped singing. The wind died down. And then he noticed it. Tree limbs snapped in half. Not chopped, not fallen. Twisted, torn. Massive branches littered the ground, too thick for any ordinary animal to break.
No. All clean. Nothing, no living animal cleans petrified sticks and keeps them as pets.
Camera in hand, he whispered into the mic. You could hear the tension rising. He stepped carefully, brushing past low branches. And then he stopped. Something was there, not far off, just beyond the tree line. A tall, unmoving figure stood between the trees. Dark, broad, upright, too big to be human, too still to be an animal.
Well, maybe it is. I don't know what you think. It's the second time something just left right there, and it was small. The vibration, it went. It did it.
He zoomed in. There, he whispered, between those two trees. It wasn't moving. It was just watching. No blinking, no twitching, just a massive shape, barely blending in, like it knew how to hide.
Super's happening. Need your help, you guys. Patreon, PayPal, Messenger. Like sooner, this will be one of the last videos you ever see.
But not perfectly. And then, in a blink, it was gone. No sound, no crack of branches, just silence. Was it Bigfoot or a trick of the light? All we know is he saw something big, something watching. And when the wilderness goes that quiet, that's when you know you're not alone out there.
So if you watch, you can see he'll blink or close his eyes. There's also clearly one right on the other side of the tree too, you can see as well. I'll just do a quick zoom so you can tell.
Every once in a while, a piece of footage surfaces that stops even seasoned investigators in their tracks. And this was one of those moments. The Rocky Mountain Sasquatch Organization, one of the most recognized groups in North America, dedicated to researching and documenting Bigfoot sightings, received a sighting video from a man named John. What John and his team captured on camera has since stirred not only curiosity, but serious conversation among cryptid researchers and skeptics alike. Using a spotting telescope and a handheld camera, John was stationed at roughly 4,200 feet elevation on Utah's Wasatch Front Range when he filmed something extraordinary. Far above them, nearly a mile higher, at an altitude around 9,000 feet, a large, bipedal creature was seen sprinting up a steep, snow-covered slope. with ease. To truly grasp the scale, imagine this: over 3 miles of visual zoom distance, over 5,000 feet of vertical climb. And yet the figure wasn't trudging or slipping. It was running fluidly with long strides, seemingly unbothered by wind or the 90 inches of snow underfoot. No skis, no snowshoes, no poles, just 2 legs and momentum.
We were sent the following footage by a person that goes by John. It was filmed on one of the mountain peaks along the Wasatch Front mountain range. The guys that filmed it were down in the valley, 4,200 feet elevation, and zoomed in on a peak 9,000 feet elevation. They did their best to film this creature running horizontal then vertical up the steep, snow-swept mountainside using a spotting telescope and holding the lens of the camera up to the viewfinder. It was almost a mile higher than the guys filming it, around 5,200 feet higher.
To put it in perspective, the narrator introduces a comparison shot. A man named Matthew Anderson, 6 feet tall, attempting to hike through just 18 inches of snow. He struggles, he staggers. Each step is a battle against the snowpack. But the creature? It moves like it's walking on solid ground. And then, the footage gets even more compelling. As the original clip is stabilized and replayed in slow motion, you can see the figure in full view. The backdrop is pure white, the creature a dark silhouette gliding across the frame. One of the men filming gasps, his voice filled with shock and disbelief. They weren't out hunting for Bigfoot. They didn't expect this. Their reaction is genuine.
This guy is 6 feet tall. This is how a large man looks hiking in 18 inches of snow. Now compare it to this creature running in 90 inches of snowpack. Just amazing footage. Big difference. I hope you guys enjoy. Keep on watching.
News of the footage spread quickly. Viewers asked the obvious question: had anyone gone out to investigate the site? Days later, a helicopter pilot who had seen the footage flew over the exact area, and what he found added another layer to the mystery. A trackway, huge footprints with long strides, each print placed directly in front of the other, like someone walking a tightrope. This track formation is consistent with many historic Bigfoot reports when the creature is said to move at high speed. Skeptics might say it's a trick of the light, a prank, or just a hiker in heavy gear. But the terrain, the distance, the gait, and the environmental challenge all beg to differ. Whether it's a hoax, a coincidence, or the clearest footage to date of something we've never been able to prove, one thing is certain. What John captured on that snowy peak wasn't ordinary, and it might just be the closest we've ever come to seeing Bigfoot before it vanished. Some encounters come by chance. Others are caught only because a camera happened to be rolling. But every now and then, what that camera captures is enough to challenge everything we think we know. In the early morning hours of May 30th, 2024, a Canadian truck driver was headed to an empty industrial site in Alberta to pick up equipment. It was routine work, no traffic, no people, just the hum of his engine and the empty road stretching through the wilderness. But what happened next turned that simple assignment into one of the most compelling pieces of evidence in recent cryptid history. The truck's dash camera was rolling, as it always does. At first, nothing seemed off, but as the truck approached the entrance to the site, the driver noticed something standing still at the edge of the tree line. A dark, towering figure. He didn't pay it much attention at first. Out there, you expect the occasional moose or bear to wander close. But when he got out of the vehicle to start loading cargo, it became clear. Standing perfectly still, just yards from the truck, was a figure estimated at 11 feet tall. Massive, wide-shouldered, covered in dark, rough fur. It didn't move. It just watched. The driver froze for a split second, and then bolted back into the cab, slamming the door shut in a panic. His dashcam kept recording, and that's what gave us the footage we have now. In those seconds, as the headlights swept across the tree line, the creature's full form became visible. Upright, clearly bipedal, not running, not hiding, just standing there, like it belonged. The driver left the site immediately. No one would have blamed him. In the days that followed, trail cameras were installed across the site to monitor the area. But it didn't reappear. Not there anyway. However, just months later, 20 miles away, a similar figure was reported by a local landowner. Tall, dark, fast-moving. Coincidence? Maybe. But what that dash cam recorded remains one of the clearest digital sightings to date. And what's most disturbing is how calm the creature seemed, like it knew it was being watched, and didn't care. So the question stands, was this a lucky break in Sasquatch research, or just a moment of eerie wilderness coincidence? Whatever it was, it's out there, and that footage is very real. 12 years ago, what began as a sweet camping trip in Utah's scenic Provo Canyon turned into one of the most unsettling encounters ever caught on camera. The area, nestled between Squaw Peak and the Little Rock Canyon overlook, is known for its remote beauty. But it's also known for something else: strange sightings. And this one? It's unforgettable. The footage begins when the man holding the camera lifts it slowly, almost without realizing what he's about to see. That's when it happens.
Yeah, I can see.
Through the branches, in the distance, something dark is moving, barely visible at first. Black, broad, still. Hidden behind the thick forest growth. The couple freezes, confused, uncertain. The man whispers to his girlfriend, "Do you think it's a bear?" His voice is unsteady, trying to make sense of what they're seeing. But then, the figure moves. It stands up, and instantly, that uncertainty becomes pure fear. This wasn't a bear. This thing was tall, massive even, clearly bipedal, with arms that swung long and heavy. Its motion was smooth, almost practiced, as it rose to full height among the trees. It didn't crawl, it stood. You can hear the woman gasp. And just like that, they run. No second guessing, no final look. They turn, leave everything behind, and sprint straight to the car. The clip ends as fast as it begins, but what it leaves behind are questions that linger to this day. What did they really see out there? Was it Bigfoot, a trick of the shadows, or something much more real? One thing's for sure, their fear was real, their panic unmistakable. So we'll ask you, if it were you in that forest, staring down something that big, that fast, and that close, could you handle that situation? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And stay with us, because sometimes it's not just nature watching you. Something else might be hiding in the trees. This footage comes from Lettuce Lake Park, Florida. It begins quietly. The camera is not steady, focused across the lake. At first, it seems like just another nature video. But then, something moves. Behind the trees, partly hidden by the brush, there's a figure, a large one. It's hard to see clearly at first. The trees and distance blur the shape. But then it shifts, and you can tell, this thing is big, covered in thick, dark fur. The way it moves, it almost looks like it's waiting, maybe trying to cross the water. The man behind the camera doesn't speak. He just keeps filming, locked in place. Zooming in reveals more. Long arms, a bulky frame, a towering height that looks well over 8 feet. Is it a person? A hoax? Some kind of animal? Or is it Bigfoot? We don't know, but even after stabilizing the video, the questions remain. Whatever it is, it's not running, it's not hiding. It's just there, moving slowly, confidently, like it's done this before. Some of the most compelling footage isn't caught with high-end cameras or professional setups. Sometimes, the strangest things are captured by accident. And that's exactly what happened here. The following dashcam footage, posted to YouTube, was reportedly filmed in the Republic of Bashkortostan, a remote and rugged region between Russia's Ural Mountains and the Volga River, near the border of Kazakhstan. This is a land steeped in wilderness, thick forests, mountain ranges, and centuries of folklore. But what you're about to see may turn that folklore into something much more real. The video begins like many late-night road clips. A quiet car ride, headlights cutting through the darkness, and a conversation in Russian between the driver and passengers. There's laughter, casual chatter, but something stands out. The word Yeti can be heard a couple of times, as if they were joking, or maybe even hoping to see something. And then, it happens. A blurry shape suddenly darts across the road, right in front of the car, within range of the headlights. It's fast, too fast. The passengers shout in surprise, and the driver hits the brakes. The car jolts to a stop. Just like that, everything changes. The vehicle stalls. The engine cuts out completely. In the dead of night, surrounded by forest and snow, silence takes over. There's a moment, maybe two, of total stillness. Then, the driver restarts the engine. The car inches forward slowly, creeping over where the figure had just passed. You can see the snow disturbed. Whatever crossed the road left tracks. The driver then shifts into reverse, backing up to get a second look. But by now, the figure is gone. The road is empty. The woods are quiet again. Too quiet.
Поехали, нафиг он нужен, блин. Какой это лось, ты видел, как бежит? Где, как фонарик? Поехали, потом. Стой. Вот, смотри.
You can hear the uncertainty in their voices, a mix of disbelief, nervous energy, and genuine fear. And who could blame them? Let's talk about what we just saw. The creature crossed the road in less than 2 seconds, and we're not talking about pavement. This is deep, heavy snow, the kind of terrain that slows down even seasoned hikers. No human, no matter how agile, could move through it at that speed. And then there's the size. Even in the dim light, the figure appears tall, upright, and fast. And it moved with a purpose. This wasn't an animal crawling. It wasn't a man trudging. This was something different, something bigger. Could it have been a hoax? A man in a suit? Maybe. But out there, in one of the coldest, most remote parts of Eurasia, who would be running around dressed as a Yeti at night? In a snowstorm? In the middle of nowhere? It makes no sense. And that's exactly what makes this so compelling. The sighting was short, just a few seconds. But those few seconds raise a lifetime of questions. What if this wasn't just a random encounter? What if what we saw was real? A Yeti, a Bigfoot. Legends say these creatures have roamed high altitudes and frozen forests for centuries. But if that's true, what else might be out there? What else is watching, hiding, waiting, in the snowy dark? We'll let you decide. Watch the clip again, slow it down, examine the frame. Look at the stride, the movement, the reaction from the people in the car. Then ask yourself, What did they really see that night in Bashkortostan? And more importantly, what else are we not seeing? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget, sometimes the scariest things aren't what you go looking for. It's what finds you. September 2023, somewhere deep in the Alberta wilderness. Two hunters set up camp east of Banff Park, along the quiet and remote David Thompson corridor. They weren't expecting anything strange, but one night, something moved near their camp. To be safe, they aimed a trail camera toward the site and left it rolling while they were out, and again through the night. What it recorded raised more questions than answers. A steady, silent shot of the camp. Nothing moves. It's calm, almost too calm. The trees rustle slightly. The fire pit is cold. The tent stands still. Minutes pass. Then, in the upper left corner of the screen, something shifts. It's faint at first, hard to make out, but then it steps closer.
There's something to the right. There's something to the right. Over in here.
A large, dark figure, tall, glowing eyes, and covered in the dark. It doesn't run. It doesn't stumble. It moves like it knows where it's going. And then, it's gone, back into the trees, as if it were never there. No sound, no panic, just a silent appearance and a disappearance. Was it a bear, a prank, or something else entirely? They never saw it with their own eyes, but the camera did. And that brief moment, a figure in the dark caught on tape, is all we have. It may not be proof, but it is something. Something that moved, something that I watched, something that left no trace behind. What you're about to see isn't blurry, it's not shaky, and it's definitely not fake. This footage comes straight from TikTok, filmed by Emmanuel Alfaro, deep in the wooded wilderness of Oklahoma. And what he captured is anything but normal. The video is short, but powerful, crystal clear and to the point. No filters, no special effects, just a phone, and a moment no one could ever prepare for. The clip begins quietly, trees swaying, light filtering through the canopy, when suddenly something strange comes into view. A figure, massive, still, sitting. It's crouched among the trees. At first glance, you might mistake it for a gorilla. But this isn't a zoo. And this creature? It's different. Its fur is thick, red, and tangled. Its build, broad and strong. And its face? That's what truly chills you. Long, unnatural features, deep-set eyes, and an expression that doesn't feel wild. It feels aware. At first, it doesn't seem to notice Emmanuel. It's just there, watching the woods. But then, slowly, it turns. Its eyes meet the lens. There's no time to think. Then, slowly, it turns. Its eyes meet the lens. There's no time to think. Emmanuel runs. The camera shakes. The forest blurs. Panic sets in. But before the image is lost, we get one last look. The creature is still there. Still staring, still unafraid. So what did Emmanuel see that day? A man in a suit? A wild animal? Or did he capture a glimpse of something real? One thing's for sure, it didn't run, but he did. Let us know what you think in the comments below. It was October 1967. The dense shadowed woods of Bluff Creek, Northern California, were calm, eerily calm. Two men, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin, were on horseback. winding through the remote forest trails. They weren't just out for a ride. They were hunting for something most people didn't believe existed. Something huge. Something covered in hair. Something people only whispered about. Bigfoot. They had heard stories from local loggers, even cast footprints that were impossible to ignore. But nothing prepared them for what they would soon capture. As they approached a dry riverbed, their horses grew uneasy. And then, just ahead, it appeared. A large bipedal figure, towering, covered in dark, matted hair, was walking along the creek bank. Not running, not hiding, walking, like it belonged there, like they were the intruders.
Where was she when you first saw her?
Just across the creek, about like from here across the creek. When I first saw her, she was standing upright. I thought, you know, this is unreal.
Patterson leapt off his horse, grabbing his camera in a scramble. His hands were shaking, the ground uneven, but he knew this was a once-in-a-lifetime moment. He hit a record. The resulting footage, though shaky, would become legendary. And in the middle of that short, grainy clip, the creature briefly turns its head toward the camera. That single glance would haunt the world for decades. Bob Gimlin was there. He watched it with his own eyes. And in a recent interview in Fresno, he revisits that day. Not to convince anyone, but to tell it like it was. "I know what I saw," he says, quiet but firm. There's no embellishment, no theatrics, just a man reliving a moment that never left him.
Around where I lived, gee whiz, I was a real outcast. And so, and I had a job and all that, you know, and so even, well, the guys that I worked with, they believed in me and stuff, but the other folks didn't, you know, they just said.
He describes the creature's movements, smooth, heavy-footed, and powerful. Its shoulders were broad, its arms swung wide. It wasn't a man, it wasn't a bear, it was something else, something unclassified. Skeptics have picked apart the footage frame by frame, calling it a hoax, a man in a costume, a stunt. But through all the noise, Bob never changed his story. He never cashed in on fame. He simply stood by what he witnessed. And that, maybe, is what makes his account so unsettling. It's not dramatic. It's real. Too real. He speaks softly about the aftermath, how the encounter followed him, not physically but mentally, for years, how some mocked him, how others begged for answers. But Bob didn't chase attention. He stayed quiet for decades because the experience was enough. The Patterson-Gimlin film is just under a minute long, but it's etched into the foundation of cryptozoology. And in that footage, grainy, imperfect, raw, you can feel it. The presence, the weight of something ancient, something to watch. Whether it was a cryptid, an undiscovered primate, or something we'll never understand, Bob Gimlin saw it. And when he says, "I know what I saw," it doesn't sound like a defense. It sounds like a warning.
I know what I saw, and if you've seen the film footage, analyze it and think about it. And don't tell me that they can't exist, and because there's so many people out in the woods all the time that would see one. I'd say, don't even talk to me about that. I said, you know, just think about what you're saying, and if you don't, then that's your ball game.
And so we're left with a question that refuses to go silent. Is Bigfoot merely a legend, born from fear, folklore, and imagination? Or is there something real, something ancient, still roaming our forests, hidden in the shadowed spaces between the trees? What would you do if it wasn't just a story? If you've captured something strange, something you can't explain, send it in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real encounters and chilling evidence from the edge of the unknown. And hit the bell icon so you never miss what the woods might reveal next. If you've ever seen something you couldn't explain, if you've caught movement in the trees or recorded something strange, share it with us. Drop your story in the comments. We're collecting encounters. Yours could be next. Subscribe for more true encounter breakdowns, real footage analysis, and eyewitness investigations. Like the video if you believe the truth belongs in the light. Until next time, stay curious, stay alert, and never walk alone.